for tuning in. I'm sorry about the news that there's been another mass shooting in the States. I think it's been confirmed that 5 people have been killed, but it's suggested that 8 may have been. And I just want to say it's so important to find a healthy outlet for negative emotions of grief and anger and distress, that you can tell yourself, all right, this isn't for nothing. These are unnecessary deaths. These are essentially Republican-sponsored, NRA-sponsored deaths that shouldn't happen, because in other countries, people with sociopathic tendencies or narcissistic, violent, aggressive tendencies can't as easily obtain weapons, lethal weapons that allow them to wreak havoc in a very short space of time before they can be stopped. So America doesn't just have a problem with sociopaths who want to take revenge on their employers or their communities, or women where they can find them, or sex workers, or any group of people. America has a problem with overly available guns. America has a problem with gun proliferation and with lack of safety mechanisms, and a problem with anti-democratic rule, a problem with an undue influence of corporate gun manufacturing stooges who masquerade as a political party on the Republican side and work to actively obstruct legislative measures that would make Americans safer. So yes, it would be frustrating and enraging to know that children's lives, that people around the states, that their lives were in danger and that lives were lost directly as a consequence of ongoing legislative sabotage from Republicans who are not the opposition. They are an anti-American gang, really. They're a front group for thieves and murderers to damage American society. Someone with the name of Alex from Milwaukee is suggesting that the problem is the Second Amendment need to change it. Well, I'd like to adapt what you're saying or alter what you're saying slightly for a statement of my own, to just reiterate that the Second Amendment refers to a militia group, which was America's initial form of an army. Without being able to subsidize a regular standing army, they went for the more informal option of having a militia, an army of volunteers who had to buy their own equipment. So the Second Amendment in and of itself does not promote the free proliferation of guns. That has been the bad, destructive work of conservative Supreme Court justices such as Anthony Scalia, who made an interpretation of the Second Amendment that was not in line with evidence from contemporary linguistic documents from that era, which show that the term bear arms was always used in a military sense. So when they said a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free nation shall not be infringed upon, or the right to bear arms shall not be infringed upon, that it referred to, we have a volunteer army that we can't afford to equip, so don't get in their way when they try to buy weapons for themselves, because they are very important to the United States. That's the only army we have at this stage. So that was at that stage. You can't say now that America has an underfunded army by any stretch of the imagination. And the willful malevolence of conservative Supreme Court justices saying, oh, yep, this is really about property rights, is probably fundamentally fueled by white supremacy. I don't know if that's been talked about a lot, but that desire to equip white people with as many guns as they can buy because they fear the pursuit of an eye for an eye, Old Testament style justice of the descendants of freed slaves, flipping the script and attacking white people and taking their property as recompense for having had their labor and liberty stolen by the system of slavery that white Americans, that the 1%, that the ruling class of white Americans profited on so substantially for so long. Biden won Arizona is here and says, "Good morning, Australia." Thank you. And says it was about hunting slaves. I've heard the argument before that the police system was about hunting runaway slaves, but a well-regulated militia was about the army. America anticipated being attacked, again, potentially by England or France or any other industrialized, successful, wealthy nation of the time with an eye to conquest. So America wanted an army to defend itself. It had already worked to liberate themselves from the British Empire. Knowledge, El Shabazz is here. Hello, Knowledge. I've got a little bit of a bot promoting free nutrition articles in a Twitch commentary. Wow, thanks for that. And somebody wants to know why I don't have earbuds. Cute. Oh, why did I click on the troll comment? I don't want to promote the nutrition articles from a bot. That was my mistake. So I'll try and replace that comment with another on-screen comment. So Nate from SD, maybe from San Diego, says, "You're wrong, and why don't you have earbuds?" Oh, you mean why don't I have specifically Apple Bluetooth headphones? Because I don't. Do you struggle that much to accept diversity of consumerism? I don't have earbuds. All right, so let's go back to talking about how multiple people have been shot at the FedEx facility near Indianapolis International Airport, because we don't want to sweep it under the carpet. We don't want to spend too much energy either just complaining about the uselessness of the standard Republican response limitation shtick of saying thoughts and prayers. Do you know what? Thoughts and prayers is okay as long as you don't stay limited to that response. So you can say thoughts and prayers, but I understand some people want to express their bitterness. But bitterness is something that you can turn into a more utilitarian emotion. By utilitarian, I could say more simply useful. You want your bitterness to be useful because the world is full of bad things and unjust things, and they happen all the time. And when we live in a world with so much information available to us, we don't want to surrender to perpetually being depressed or anxious because we have the capacity to encounter unjust, sad, tragic things 24 hours a day if we so choose. If we're drawn to looking at that to validate our worldviews and say, yes, everything is terrible. It's not okay to just relax into that level of cynicism and bitterness of saying, yes, everything's terrible, nothing can be done about it. That's not how progress has been made. That's not how justice has ever been achieved. It's not okay to relax and get comfortable in apathy, even though I extend some empathy to people who are tempted to do that. And I'll surely say I've been tempted as well myself at times. This show exists for the opposite purpose, to help galvanize people to use their negative emotions and not relax into bitterness, but to use those emotions and forge them in a fire into a stronger resolve, a resolve to find other people, to build consensus, to not just be a majority that's oppressed by a domineering, bullying minority group of white Christofascists, not exclusively white, but predominantly white Christofascists who seek to preserve gun manufacturing profit at the expense of the nation, of those individuals in the nation. And yep, this is all about building resolve and building a community and building a critical mass of resolved citizens who are resolved to keep speaking up, to keep sharing truth rather than complaining about lies. So, mass casualty situation near Indianapolis International Airport. It's not acceptable. It's happened, so we're not going to pretend to ourselves that it hasn't happened and just turn away and stare at the wall or find a distraction to be able to stop thinking about it. We owe it to the young people of America who are particularly oppressed by having to do gun safety drills in their schools and hide from potential mass shooters and engage with that disturbing, adrenaline promoting hypothetical scenario on a regular basis. So, yeah, is everybody comfortable with letting kindergartners have to practice hiding in toilet stalls to hide from someone with a gun who will hunt them down and injure them or shoot them or destroy their lives going forwards by killing their friends and teachers and family members? When we consider all those who have been lost to gun violence in the US, it's easy to see how people could get stuck in emotions of despair or get very strongly motivated to ignore the whole thing. So how do we mitigate those impulses to ignore or run away or hide or become hardened and brittle? Keep talking firmly and positively about what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is to continue to notice that it's not a bipartisan problem, that the opposition to gun safety laws lies in the Republican Party, that they are a front for a gun lobby group now and have been for some time. Trump helped peel the lid off that a bit so that maybe more people are aware now, but it takes a lot. It takes more than a majority to defeat Republicans because of the baked-in gerrymandering that is the Senate. And if people don't know, historically speaking, Republicans gerrymandered the Senate in 1889 and 1890 by creating 6 more states. Knowledge El Shabazz must have gone away and come back because they say thanks for responding. Oh no, they say hello again. And Biden 1 Arizona says, thanks for responding. You are so thoughtful. Much appreciated. I try. So yes, yesterday I brought up a statistic about how many homicides there were per 100,000 people in the US. And it was 5.5 in the US and 1.1 in Australia. And those are statistics from 2012, but I just haven't seen an updated graph representing that situation. So data taken from 2010 to 2012 indicated that the US had a homicide rate that was 5 times higher than equivalent wealthy nations in Europe, in Australia, and pro-gun people will try and compare homicide rates of the US with homicide rates of places that struggle with endemic poverty and violence and drug culture, which is a bad faith comparison because the US is wealthy enough and has achieved enough that they don't have to be saddled with this problem. They don't have to live in a violent society where people are murdered more regularly than they are in other places. And I haven't even begun to touch on suicide and how suicide rates are higher in the US than in many other places because of gun proliferation, which facilitates suicide. People also have depression and despair in other nations, but America has a proliferation of guns, which means people who attempt suicide have much higher rates of success. So that means something because in other nations, if you try and you fail, you can get treatment and psychological help and have an absolutely wonderful life. So we should never be so cynical as to to say that those who experience periods in their life in which they're suicidal, that they should be write-offs, or we shouldn't fight for them. We should fight for them. We should fight for all future potential people who attempt to take their own life, and say if there were less available guns, those people would be more likely to live and enjoy happiness and be able to accept help rather than be lost. So it's cool. There's quite a lot of people who were watching or are watching. I'm looking at the little feature that has an eye on it, and it says 424 people watching. So that's good. I guess it's because it's an important topic. So maybe a few people are visiting today, which means I might go back to Washington Post and bring up the Second Amendment and how it's been misrepresented by Supreme Court judges as well as gun rights activists and what I might call as gun fetishists. So the words we use, oopsies, I'll be back in a second. I'm just bringing up this Washington Post article that's written by someone who's a professor of English and linguistics. Linguistics is the most important part because Antonin Scalia did not use the available evidence to discuss guns. So there he is. There's a little picture of his face. This man, even though he may have felt at some level that he was acting in a responsible way, has helped to unleash hell on American families and children and communities, etc. There's such a critical mass now of people who do directly know someone who's been negatively impacted by gun violence, who's had something stolen from them, who knows somebody who's had potential decades of happy existence ripped away from them in an untimely fashion, or people who've had injuries from bullets which are expensive to treat, which must be incredibly painful. Gun bullets can just rip through your body and breaking bones and taking away large chunks of muscle tissue and flesh and nerves. And these things are devastating. But so much power has been put in the hands of people who are disgruntled, disaffected, just psychologically maladjusted. I won't even say psychological illness because they might not have an illness. They might just have they might be overburdened with hatred. And I don't think that yet has been classified on the DMV as a problem. But it is a problem when people get carried away with hate and then they can only think to relieve themselves by causing destruction. Freud gave a name to it. Freud called it thanatos, or the death wish. And there's a lot of that about, particularly amongst men who are sometimes cut off from one of the principal joys of life, which is to aspire to raising a happy family, or to aspire to being involved with a happy family. Even in the capacity of an aunt and uncle, there's a lot of men who haven't been socialized to value that, to value finding happiness through other people. Women can tell you that there's some downsides to being conditioned to believe that you should have children and you have to devote yourself to family. Sometimes who you are as a person can get subsumed into that urge to do your best, to be the best mother or family member you can be. But the upside to it is that it's perpetually sets new challenges. It's relatively easy for many people to feel like they've achieved, and therefore to get a dopamine hit of satisfaction from going, look at my happy family, everything's going well, this is good. And that can absorb your psychological energies, and you don't start sitting alone by yourself in a room fantasizing about how you're going to revenge yourself on the people who fired you, or on women for rejecting you, or on people with a different religion or ethnic background to you. You have more healthy outlets for your emotions, and you don't get stuck into a negative, self-perpetuating cycle of sociopathy. antisocial, misanthropic behavior. Misanthropic means hating people. It's a good word, actually, because it doesn't sound medicalized, but it's still fancy. It has lots of syllables. Misanthropic just means hating people. So yes. All right. So I've left Antonin Scalia's face up there, but what I wanted to scroll down to was that it was 2008 when Scalia was the deciding opinion in the District of Columbia versus Heller decision that said the amendment supports an individual right to own a gun for any lawful purpose, a right that has nothing to do with military service. So Scalia helped really cement that idea that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free nation, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. He's like, yeah, that doesn't refer to a well-regulated militia really at all. A well-regulated militia means, or we're just going to ignore that bit. We're going to ignore the opening clause of the Second Amendment and just say, go buy guns, people. Yep, you can have them as long as it's lawful. So sure, you can't have them near certain buildings. There's certain types of guns you can't have, but you can have pretty much anything you like. Knock yourselves out, white people. Make sure that the descendants of freed slaves are never able to invert the order of our society and just start helping themselves to your property in order to recompense themselves for slavery, that the system of slavery that white wealthy people imposed on enslaved Black Americans who were brought to America from the African continent. That type of worldview is barely below the surface for a lot of people once you start actually looking at their actions and how there's no easy way to reconcile what they've done, because Scalia unleashed hell on the United States by separating the Second Amendment from reference to the militia, to the military. He's opened people up to a world of hurt because making it easier to own guns, making it easier for householders to say, well, it's my right. The Second Amendment, it's not about the military, it's about me and my right to own whatever guns I like, and to establish a cache of weaponry and to spend my days and nights fantasizing about who I'm going to kill and exert power over. It's a massive misunderstanding of human nature and what you do to a society when you embolden people who think it's fun and appropriate to aspire to killing many other people. So I haven't had any commentary for a little bit, but that's okay. Maybe people are just chewing over what I've said, and I guess it's always a good thing to not have trolls. So in his opinion in Heller, Justice Antonin Scalia, who said we must understand the Constitution's words exactly as the framers understood them, disconnected the right to keep and bear arms from the need for a well-regulated militia, in part because he concluded that the phrase bear arms did not refer to military contexts in the founding era. So linguists have gone right back to that and said, when we've actually looked at databases of English writing from the founding era, it's confirmed, very, very profoundly and thoroughly confirmed, that the term bear arms is a military term. So non-military uses of the phrase bear arms are not just rare, they're almost non-existent. When they've analysed over 138 million words, they've found 281 instances of the phrase bear arms, and then only a handful of those don't refer to war, soldiering, or organised armed action. So basically, it is completely unsupportable for Scalia to have done what he did, to say, oh yeah, we've got to look at the true intent of the founders in writing the Second Amendment, and I'm going to just ignore a huge body of evidence about how that phrase, bear arms, was 99% of the time used to refer to military action. And yeah, so I'm just arguing that, and this is supposition, that yes, white supremacy or white wealth supremacy, white wealth preservation drives led him to do that, to so expose the American people to danger. Knowledge El Shabazz says he's listening just to reassure me that there is an audience here, which I'm grateful for. Thank you, Knowledge. This is a very interactive platform, or it has the potential to be very interactive. So even though I'm delivering a monologue, essentially, I do like to know sometimes that, yes, I have an audience and that they're not just here to observe a lady. So police and emergency personnel are responding to a FedEx facility where reports say 8 people have been shot. The shooter has not been detained and may still be shooting. All right, let's see if there's any updates on that. And why is Sean Hannity trending? Oh, wow. People are reacting to Sean Hannity describing Adam Toledo as a 13-year-old man. And they're contrasting that with Pam Bondi, who was an attorney general for Florida, also a Trump lawyer during his second impeachment. And she described 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, who killed 2 people by shooting at them with an AR-10, I think. But she referred to people on Hannity's show as a little boy. She said, you've got a little boy out there trying to protect his community. So let's just listen to those 2 contrasting audio clips just to remind ourselves of the injustice that occurs as a consequence of a protection racket for white people that then refers to a 17-year-old person who's killed people as a little boy, and a 13-year-old who had his arms up with no weapons in them and who was shot and killed by a police officer as a man, a 13-year-old man.
This kid was out there trying to help people. Were people killed? Absolutely. But again, we don't know yet. You've got a little boy out there trying to protect his community. Should he have been out there with a gun? No. But should he have been charged with murder? We just don't know yet. And they charged him 2 days later. So, it's a war zone out there. What's it coming to in these liberal cities when teenagers have to go out there to try to provide aid to other people who are getting injured by these rioters?
Okay, so a lot of linguistic things to unpack from what Pam Bondi said there. What are things coming to in these liberal cities? Is Wisconsin, Kenosha a liberal city? In any case, her statement is full of the assumption that he had to go. He had to take a weapon to that town to protect it, that property rights should overrule considerations of not bringing a semi-automatic weapon to a town where you might fire it and kill people. Property rights over the right of people to live. And yes, the double standard of calling him a little boy. So much, you could imagine that being said to a jury to try and emotionally manipulate a jury. And of course, that's what conservatives are always trying to do. They're always trying to manipulate the American public in order to preserve their anti-democratic stranglehold on the American government and therefore the American nation. Because when you have a Senate that is slanted towards states which have low population density, that are relatively rural, and that areas where slavery persisted until the election of Abraham Lincoln, those are places with a high degree of attachment to a worldview that prioritizes white interests and relegates the interests of Black Americans to a lower tier, where it's not that important that people protesting in favor of Black lives, that they be protected, that they be free from harm, that they be free from a 17-year-old running around with a semi-automatic weapon. Well, got a little trolley person. So if it keeps up, then my only way to get rid of them is to stop broadcasting to YouTube. So I'll keep that as an option. People like that take the word of fascist journalist Andy Ngo, it's probably how I pronounce his name, who consorted with fascists who were conspiring to attack people, and he stayed there because he embeds himself with far-right groups. So when I get a far-right group, I go, there's no way really to keep them quiet or believe them, because they just circulate lies and make everything difficult for people. So I'll just stop. Bye-bye YouTube viewers, if there are any at the moment, until I get, sweetie, I have no way of establishing you are who you say you are, but your voice and your arguments are that of a troll. And it's true that some people who are, that's what you say, but you're saying it all at a very high volume of commentary, which is overwhelming, and so you need to go.